This is a recording for the CUPHAT project. My name is Matthew O'Brien. Today is the 8th of August 2023 and I have here with me Nicky Butler. Thank you very much, Nicky. Can you confirm for the recorder that you're happy to take part in the project?
Yes, I am.
Brilliant. And could you just spell your name for the recorder, please?
Okay, it's Nicola, so Nicola, and Butler, Butler.
Brilliant. And do you prefer Nicola?
No.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify. So, Nicky, could you tell me a little bit about your early life? When and where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in South Africa and I grew up there. So I moved to Ireland when I was around 30. So, grew up in Johannesburg, in big city, in the suburbs in the big city.
And you said you moved here when you were kind of 30.
Yeah.
What were the main differences? Sorry, you moved to Rathdangan when you were 30?
No, Ireland.
Oh, Ireland, okay.
Yeah,
and where did you live when you came to Ireland?
I first lived in Carlingford.
Okay.
Yeah, so I got a job in an adventure centre there, and so worked there for a few years. And then ended up in Glencree, volunteering in Glencree in the Wicklow Mountains, and yeah, then a few different places I've lived around here anyway.
And so, what were the main kind of differences maybe between growing up in Johannesburg and coming to, kind of Wicklow in the Wicklow Mountains?
Well, world of difference. Well, Johannesburg, first, the obvious thing to go to is weather. So, Johannesburg would be very warm, very dry. So, we'd, especially in the winter, we'd get summer rainfall. So, winter, you'd be like scratching your skin, it'd be so dry. Summer would be thunderstorms. Until this year, I'd never seen a thunderstorm like we did in Johannesburg. The people, there's difference in culture, I guess. I grew up in a English-speaking household, which would be more like the Irish culture, I guess, than if I'd been in an Afrikaans or one of the coloured cultures. But I guess in culture terms, the Irish people are very friendly, a lot more drinking. Generally very welcoming here. So I don't know where else to go there. Give me a prompt.
So even in terms of like the kind of landscapes,
so Johannesburg, like I lived in suburbia, so it was just like suburb after suburb after suburb. Like we were about maybe half an hour to 45 minutes from the actual city centre. So just basically lived within suburbs and shopping centres, like big shopping centres. Dundrum would be the only one that would compare that I've seen, and Liffey Valley maybe. The Wicklow Mountains, like I would have lived very far from any mountains in Johannesburg, so it was all just flat. This is really, really beautiful scenery here. Coming from South Africa to Ireland, you just get amazed, the greenery and the beauty. So there's beautiful places, of course, in South Africa, but so I was in suburbia, so you'd have to travel to see them. So.
And what was your main motivation for coming to Ireland?
Actually, it was my brother, because it was the middle of the Celtic Tiger and he's in IT, and so he decided to move over here and get a job in computers. And I'd always kind of felt not quite comfortable in South Africa. I always felt like I wasn't meant to be living there, like I'd meant to move away, and just life gets in the way and you never do anything about it. And then when he moved over here, I was like, he's living my dream. So it kind of spurred me on, and I came to visit him here, took a holiday, and basically just fell in love with the country. So went back home, quit my job, looked for a job here, found a job in the Carlingford Adventure Centre and moved over, and that was that. So
what kind of work were you doing when you were in Carlingford?
So I was an outdoor adventure instructor, so was doing water sports, kayaking and mountain climbing, and challenge course and orienteering, archery, all those kind of things, you know. So.
And was that something that you always had an affinity for?
Well, I've always when it comes to sports, I've never liked organised sports. I've always liked more the adventure kind of things. And although I'd never had any experience really, I mean, besides hiking, it really really called to me when I saw the job. So, and at that stage, I didn't need any formal training because there were certain jobs in the centre that you could do without it, and then they kind of trained you and sent you on courses to do others. So, yeah.
And when you came to Wicklow, where did you pitch up first?
First, we're in Carlingford. Basically, when I was working there, the rules changed in regards to work permits, and I could no longer get a work permit. The job didn't fit the criteria. So I was very happy in Ireland, so to try find a way to stay, I ended up having to volunteer. And so I got a volunteering job in Glencree, Peace and Reconciliation Centre. And I volunteered there for about 2.5 years-ish. And then I actually got a work permit through them, and I stayed on and ended up being there for about 5 years till I got made redundant. So that was my introduction to Wicklow. So.
And when did you come to Rathdangan?
Actually, only a year and a half ago. Before that, I was living just on the outskirts of Baltinglass, with my husband. So he wasn't my husband then. So yeah.
And where? So you when you came to Wicklow or Wexford? Sorry, Wicklow first. You were in Baltinglass. How long were you there for?
On and off for around 10 years. So, yeah, in between I moved we had an on-off relationship. So, moved to Kilkenny for 2 years because I did an arts and crafts course there and got a job in Blessington. So I was there for a year. But yeah, other than that, I was backwards and forwards between. But I was around about 10 years in Baltinglass area. So.
And as that was your first experience of Wicklow, were there any? Did you feel welcome when you first arrived?
Yeah. Okay. So actually, I was first in Glencree. So I was there, and when I was working at Glencree, I lived in mostly Dublin. So I'd be travelling backwards and forwards from Dublin, and then Ashford. But yeah, I think I found maybe Carlingford more welcoming. I found it harder to make friends in the side of the world. Maybe it was just because of I was living in the village in Carlingford and working in a very central place and got to know loads of people. Whereas here I was living 10 minutes drive outside of the town, and I got to know the people my husband knew, but found it harder to meet people and make friends in the actual town. So.
And tell me a little bit about when you first moved to Rathdangan. Are there any kind of standout memories from that move?
Well, it's been a process because we bought a site and we built. So my first memory would be when we actually got the site, and it was, not the first memory, but it was, all exciting, and we just had a mobile in a field and stables, and we had to landscape it. So it was basically, we bought a field which was a bog, and my husband had to hire a machine and dig down quite deep to get to solid sandy ground. And the first few weeks, month even, was it was like a quagmire, getting stuck walking in wellies and losing your welly behind, and great fun. And the first day we actually brought the machine up, it was snowing that day, so that was fun.
And did you settle into Rathdangan quite quickly then?
When I joined the history group, that's when I started to meet people and make friends. So yeah.
And tell me a little bit more about the history group.
It's not a big group, but they're very welcoming and they do lots of interesting things. And I'm really interested in the history of the area, so It was a perfect fit for me, and they're lovely people. We meet mostly in the summer. I think most history groups tend to have, and then they'd have a meeting about once a month or so, and they'd bring us on outings to various places. So very interesting.
Could you tell me a little bit about some of the items that you've been on?
We've been to Kilranilla twice, and we went to Brussels Town Ring. But I haven't been part of the group for that long, so I think that's it. Besides meeting in the hall, and he's got more planned for this coming up.
And of the history you know of the area, is there any particular piece of history that means something to you or that you really find interesting?
There's it's a really interesting story about and I lead the tour, but I still get the Irish words wrong. So hiking Eid Amir, there's a whole saga around that in Brussels Town Ring. So it's really interesting, the whole story of it. So that really intrigued me.
Could you tell us a little bit about the story?
It's very long and convoluted. Just how do I bring it shorter? So basically, the hiking Eid Amir, he had a son whose name was Cumhaiskach, and Cumhaiskach decided he wanted to do the striplings-free circuit of Ireland, which was basically to go around and sleep with all the lesser king's wives. And so High King Eid said, "No bother, son, off you go," and he gave him permission. And so off Cumhaiskach went, but when he got coming down to the Baltinglass area, there was the King of Leinster who lived in the area at that time, and he objected to the idea of someone else sleeping with his wife. So he made a plan, and he very cleverly he disguised himself as a slave, and he went in around the men. He had Cumhaiskach's own personal retinue billeted in Baltinglass, and the rest he had billeted off elsewhere around Leinster. And his wife came to Cumhaiskach and said, I'm happy to grant your request, but could you do me the honour of serving your men first, feeding your men? And so Cumhaiskach said, yes, that's no problem. And in doing that, she was able to escape to the green of Kilranilla. And in the meantime, Brandub, he was going in amongst the men, and he came across the jester, Cumhaiskach's jester, and he had, I think it was 8 underling jesters. And so the jester demanded to be fed, and so Cumhaiskach, earlier on in the day, he had actually been given this huge big pot and a pronged fork. And the guy who gave it to him said, "That's a magical fork." And so when Brandub, he put the fork into the big pot, and out he brought 9 pieces of meat in one go. And the jester was amazed and said, "That cannot be the actions of a slave. That must be the king in disguise." So he ran back to Cumhaiskach and said. He told him the story, and Cumhaiskach agreed, but it was too late. Brandub had barred the doors to the house and set the house alight. And the jester cried out, said, "How can you do this to me? I've been fed by your own hand." And Brandub said, "Okay, I'll allow you to escape and no one else." So he said, "You can escape out over the rafters there." And so the jester said to Cumhaiskach, "Here, you take my clothes and you can escape." And so Cumhaiskach did that. He dressed as the jester, and he jumped out over the rafters and over the wall, and he injured himself as he fell, but he managed to limp his way to the green of Kilranilla. But before he got there, one of Brandub's men recognized him and took his head and presented it to Brandub. But then, of course, High King A was very upset about this. So his wonderful son had been killed. So he marched down on Brandub, and a battle raged, to cut a very long story short, a battle raged in the valley there around Brussels Town Ring and Kilranilla, and in the end result of that was hiking aid, and Mayor lost his head too. So,
and in terms of history and folklore, are there any other kind of stories from the area, or indeed, I know with Tierna Glass, which we'll talk about, are there any folk tales about Kilranilla?
Yeah, that's one of them. There's I'm sorry, my mind's gone blank. What's his name again? I'm stuck on Brandon. Buchet. Buchet and Etna. So there's a story. He was an innkeeper on the green of Kilranilla. It's another long story. Then there's Ronan MacAid. There's a story about him and his son and the queen that fancied his son. Then there's Finn McCool and his wife. There's on Cadine. There's giant hill figures that are over 100 years. They've been there. It's just like markings in the heather and grass or whatever. But it's amazing. The figures have still been there for so many years. So yeah, stories about that being Finn McCool and his wife, or else there's a controversial story there that is actually Dermot and Grania, not Finn McCool at all. Then there's history. There's Michael Dwyer's big presence in this area. So there's a few stories around that. Sam McAllister's buried in the graveyard, and he gave his life for Michael Dwyer. So those are the major ones, I think. Yeah.
And could you tell me a little bit about Tierna Glass? So how did that get started, and what was your motivation, I suppose, with it?
Well, I used to live right below Kilranilla Hill, and I found out that there was a stone circle on the hill, and so one of the locals showed me where it was, and then I got interested in the history and the ancient sites around the area. So my husband and I, we found online one of those old maps and found all the red dots to show all the historical sites, and we started going around the place trying to find the red dots. And we found a few more of the sites on Kilranilla. But yeah, that was one thing. And then I did a track and trail lowland leader course, guide course in Baltinglass, and to prepare for the final exam we had to each lead a walk, and I decided to lead my walk on Kilranilla Hill, and so I did more research, and I found more and more stuff, talking to locals, went to the library online, found more and more interesting things about the hill, and I started to think this could be something. So anyway, I got permission to do the walk around, and then I eventually got up the guts and I asked, because it's all on private land, so I asked permission to actually lead tours on the hill. So yeah, that's how I got going.
And give me kind of an idea as to what the tour kind of entails. So how would it unfold? So
we'd basically start at the graveyard, do a walk around the few major sites in the graveyard, and then we'd basically take a looped walk around the hill and go down to there's St. Bridget's Well is in the graveyard, and then we go down to her headstone and chair, then back up to the stone circle. There's a cairn hidden away in the forest, a ring fort, the white stones of Aoife, and then loop back up to the graveyard. So, and as we go along, we come across the different sites and tell the history and the legends associated with the sites. So.
And the graveyard, what's the name of the graveyard?
Kilranilla Graveyard.
Kilranilla Graveyard, okay. What is the significance of the white stones of Aoife? So there's two or three different times when they're mentioned in different stories. One is in the tale I told of Brandub and Kumaskak and Hiking Aid. Because where Hiking Aid was camped out, he sent some people as lookouts to hide by the white stones of Aoife. And they're called
the cows of Aoife because they looked like white cows grazing on the hillside, because they're big white quartz boulders. And so then they also mentioned in Ronan's saga, and then they were but I've been told that they actually were almost like a place of pilgrimage. I haven't found any evidence of that myself, but I was told that by a local that people used to pilgrimage there, or almost like pilgriming to Glendalough or something. So.
And where was your favourite place to walk? Where is your favourite place to walk in, I suppose, the Wicklow Mountains, the upland areas?
Favourite. I've been Acadian's lovely. I mean, that's on my doorstep. Done a few like sunset walks there, and that's amazing. I mean, I obviously love Kilranilla because that's feels like my home turf, and I love Bolton Glass Hill as well, but that's a bit more tricky because of the private land. So, but we know one of the farmers, so we usually go up on his land. Other than that, yeah, there's loads of places that are lovely to walk. So, yeah. And
could you tell me a little bit more about Kadeen? You mentioned it earlier on, and some of the kind of history that's associated with it.
Yeah. Well, yes, the giant hill figures. It's supposed to be Finn McCool and his wife. There's a cairn on top. I think there's a cairn on. It's Kadeen, and then Carrig is at the other side of it. I think there's a cairn on Carrig's side as well. I haven't actually been to that though. There's also a cursus on it. It's kind of like a long, it's like two walls and an enclosure enclosed at the bottom. The sun's supposed to, in summer solstice, supposed to go over the cairn on Kadeen, through the cursus and down in through the stone circle on Kilranilla. There's one or two ring forts on the hill as well, so it's a few different sites on there too.
And given that you spend quite a lot of time, I suppose, on these kind of trails and these sites, how would you kind of describe the state of maybe nature in the Wicklow Mountains?
I think in general it's pretty good. Like, it's well kept. The most places you'll find rubbish is on the roads, little bugs throwing stuff out of their cars. But, I mean, I know that some parts of it, the Wicklow County or whoever takes care of it, they've done a good job with trails keeping. In other places, it's just completely wild, so there is no trail.
And you mentioned about permissions for land. How difficult has that been for you?
So, well, on Kilranilla, it was just a matter of me getting up the courage to ask, and he had to think about it, and then he came back to me and said that's no problem. So that I didn't find too difficult, but like, I was thinking of doing tours in Bolton Glass and on Brussels-Town Ring. But as yet, I still haven't managed to actually find the owner of the land for Brussels-Town Ring, so I haven't managed to do that yet. And then I've been advised not to even try with the guy owns a land in Bolton Glass, so that is quite against walkers going up there. So so that's been a bit more difficult.
And where did you come up with the name Tierna Glass?
So, actually, I first came up with that doing arts and crafts. I'd done stained glass course and another arts and crafts course at Grennan Mill, and so I was going to focus on doing stained glass, and so I always loved the story of Tierna Nog, and then so then I thought of Tierna Glass because glass work, so land of glass, and also a double play on the meaning because glass, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, but glass in Irish is green, so land of green. So and then when I decided to do the walking tours, I kind of thought, actually, that kind of still works because Bolton glass, there's glass in it as well. So, and also walking trails, you'd be walking in the green. So I decided to stick with it.
Very good. And to go back to just kind of the outdoors for a moment, what for you would be some of the most important kind of plants, habitats, or kind of I suppose animals in the area?
Well, I mean, I guess the forestry, I love the forestry, although there's a lot of controversy about that because, you know, you have the spruce forest, they don't allow nature to really grow under them. So, like, I love, like, the native Irish forests as well, but they're harder to find. But then the deer, I love the deer. Although when we started planting trees, I started to hate the deer because I ate them all. Yeah, deer and hare, I guess. I mean, I just love being. I mean, whether there's trees or not, just being out in the hills and the fresh air and the greenery and the wind and sunshine. Not so much the rain.
And we talked a little bit about kind of folk tales or the history of some of the kind of sites that you mentioned. Are you aware of any kind of like local superstitions that might be attached to certain practices or traditions in the area?
None that I can think of. Yeah, there's one story about I wouldn't call it a superstition. Oh, maybe it's a superstition, depending on which way you look at it. There was someone who was to be buried, a lady named Una. She was to be buried in Kilranilla, in the graveyard there, but she lived in Glenmalure, so her body was to be carried all the way to Kilranilla graveyard. It's quite a long way, and apparently in the old days, if you wanted direct access to heaven, you paid the bucks and you got buried in Glendalough, and you then therefore you paid your way into heaven. But if you were poor, apparently Kilranilla was well known because in the graveyard there's these stones called the gates of heaven, that if you carry the body through these stones, upright stones, then you're guaranteed direct passage into heaven. So apparently if you're poor, that was your second option to get buried in Kilranilla, because then you'd get direct access into heaven and you didn't have to pay the big bucks to get buried there. So anyway, so this lady, I guess she was poor because she was getting buried in Kilranilla and they couldn't afford to hire a horse and cart maybe, so they carried her all the way from Glenmalure to Kilranilla, and being Catholic they had to stop and say the Hail Mary at every crossroads. So it took them a long time to get to Kilranilla. So there's a story about, so that's, I guess that would be the superstition. You have to do the cross or the superstition, but you wouldn't look at it as a superstition if you're a Catholic, I guess.
And again, given kind of the time you spend outdoors, what do you think are the most interesting features of the kind of local physical landscape?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, sorry. Just what do you think are the most interesting features of the local physical landscape?
In Wicklow Hills, or interesting features of the local physical. I don't know. Just in general, I just love the mountains. When I moved away, when I was living in Kilkenny, I actually realised I actually really missed the mountains. There's just something so beautiful about it. I know when I'd be driving like through, say, the Sally Gap or Glenmalure or whatever, I'd be like, I always have this funny little thing. My husband's probably going to kill me for saying this, but we'd be driving through and I'd be going, in my head I'd be going, oh, this is so beautiful, and then all of a sudden he goes, oh, depressing, isn't it? And it was basically because his family used to go camping there and they'd be dumped there and it'd be raining for 3 days solid and they'd be stuck in their tents. So yeah, so that was his memories, but I would think they're just amazing, the beauty of them. One of my favorite places now I think about it is Guinness Lake. I forget the real name of the lake. Just over on the other side of the Sally Gap. It's really beautiful scenery over there.
Would you travel there much?
I used to. When I worked at Glencree and I was living in Ashford, I used to drive the back way over the mountains, and I'd go that way. Oh, it's amazing. That road is beautiful and scary to drive because it's like on a cliff face. Oh, it's really beautiful.
And how important would you say local culture or the culture in Wicklow is to what what you do with the kind of walking trails, and do you think that that's of interest to people in the area, or is it predominantly of interest to people coming from outside?
I've had a mix. I've had a good few people local and are interested. Because they wouldn't. They could go walking on the land there, but because it is private, they might be asked, "What are you doing here?" kind of thing. And then they wouldn't be able to find all the sites on the hill without me. So, so I've definitely had a bit of interest from local. I guess I'd say it's nearly half-half. I've had people coming from Wexford, Dublin, Kildare, Laois even, and then I've had a few overseas people as well. So I'd say it's about half-half actually, local and otherwise.
The people that are coming from overseas, where have they come from? Have you had an interesting cross-section of people?
I've had a few Americans, one or two from Britain. I had one or two from Europe, but they were generally here because one of their partner, girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever was actually living here. So Europe would have been an Irish connection, whereas America and the UK, they would have been coming just for a holiday. So.
What do you think are some of the most important aspects of local, I suppose, natural heritage in the Wicklow Mountains? Do you think it's the kind of maintenance of landscapes or the protection of biodiversity, or what do you think it is?
Okay, just say the question again.
Sorry, yeah. So, what for you are the most important aspects of local natural heritage in the Wicklow Mountains?
Most important aspects. Well, I think it's partly access. There's so many amazing spots, but they're really hard to get to, or they're on private land. It's so. Then there's the really well-known places like Glendalough. Loads of access to that, easy to get to, but the lesser-known ones it's quite tricky. And especially on the west side, like the east side of Wicklow is much more taken note of than the west side of Wicklow. So, although there's places here that are just as or nearly as amazing as Glendalough or the Wicklow jail, they're just kind of are not given the same priority. So, and then there's the whole problem of private land. So, a lot of these sites are on private land. So, I've been told that if an ancient site or something of historical value is on private land, then the public have a right to access it, and the farmer or whoever should allow it. But I think the farmers wouldn't agree with that. So it would be wonderful if something could be done in the local councils or the governments, if they could make deals with farmers and provide access to these sites without impinging on the farmers.
What sites in particular do you think suffer from a lack of access?
Brusselstown Ring, Bolton Glass Hill, Kilranilla. I'm lucky that I got permission to lead the tours there, but I know local people on all three of those sites have been stopped by the landowners and said, "What are you doing here?" Sometimes politely, sometimes impolitely. So.
And do you think there are any other threats other than access to local culture or natural heritage?
I guess threats with the sites are just not being looked after, so they'd end up crumbling away. Sometimes, I'm sure it's happened so many times and we've no idea that farmers have destroyed sites not realizing the value of them or caring. Threats. And then there's always the, someone decides to build a road and or housing estates, whatever, and something gets destroyed. So, but I mean, there's so many ancient sites around Ireland, we wouldn't have even known that they were there. They've just been destroyed in the past by, progress.
And on that point, are there any local kind of advocacy groups or community groups that are kind of pushing back against that, or are trying to broker deals with farmers or with other landowners?
I don't know anyone particularly local. I mean, there's the Bolton Glass History Group and the Ratangan History Group that I know of that are very active, but as far as pushing back against sites being destroyed, I don't know how far they're going there. Well, there was on Kilranilla specifically, they were going to put wind turbines up, and that the local community got really active against that. So it became a whole thing about I think it was called Save Ireland's Ancient East. I could have the name wrong. But yeah, so they got, and that put Kilranilla up on the map almost because people wouldn't have known about all the ancient sites on the hill except for the fact that they were going to put wind turbines on there, and then it brought it all into notice. So,
and if you had to bring a group of tourists to any particular site, or if you could design maybe your ideal trail, where would that be and why?
I mean, my three favourites is, maybe it's just because I'm living in this area now, it's become my passion. So I guess would be Bolton Glass Hill, Brussels Town Ring, and Kilranilla. And I'd love to see like a proper trail up to each. Well, Kilranilla is a bit different because there's so many different sites on it, and they like spread far around the hill. So it would be hard to make a specific trail that goes, I've kind of cut out my own paths in certain places, but it would be hard to make a proper trail that went from site to site. But Bolton Glass Hill and Brussels Town Ring, I think deals could definitely be done with the farmers. They could maybe put up one specific trail and 2 fences on each side so that you're not going into any farmer's land, and it would allow you direct one. If there's only one route up and people can use it, they tend to use that rather than going traipsing all over the farmers' fields and causing havoc. Which you got to see the other farmers' point of view as well. We did get chased off Bolton Glass Hill once, and the farmer described his concerns. People trying to kill sheep and they'd be calling the authorities for maybe a sheep that's lying down and looks sick, but the farm hadn't gone around to it, and leaving rubbish, breaking down fences. You can understand the farmers' point of views there. So I think it would be good to have like one specific access point, whereas people can go up and be able to access these amazing sites without interfering with the farmers' lands.
And in your time of living in Wicklow, has the natural landscape changed at all over time? I mean, you mentioned there was a seasonability to it, I suppose, earlier, but have you noticed any changes like weather or shifts in physical kind of spaces?
Physical, I don't think so much physical. It's pretty much been the same as far as I can think. I mean, weather-wise, it's just, I don't know, maybe just because we've come through the month of July, we've just been non-stop rain. There's definitely been, you've always had your rainy times, but I think it's been quite a lot this month. So it's been harder to lead tours or to get bookings because, how can you guarantee you're going to get a rain-free day?
And since moving to Wicklow, have you taken part in or been involved in any way with local celebrations or events, even maybe with the history group?
Through the history groups, other than that, local celebrations. I mean, I can't think of anything in particular. In Blessington, there was a full moon ceremony that I go to every now and again on the Blessington Lake. I mean, there's festivals. There was the Raspberry Festival I've been to, and there was the Knock and Stocken one that's since not going anymore. Can't think of anything else.
And what was involved with both the Raspberry and the...
So the Knock and Stocken was like a mini festival, like electric picnic kind of thing, but much more local and small. And then Raspberry again would also be a festival like that, but it would be more aimed at kids. So, well, not aimed at kids, but be family friendly, very family friendly. So there'd be lots of kids, which is great. Yeah.
And so I wonder, Nicky, how much would you consider yourself to be from the Wicklow Mountains now?
You know what, you're always going to be a blow-in if you if you move in quite late in life, but I definitely feel like it's my home now. I suppose I could imagine living elsewhere, but I feel very happy here now. So.
And does it hold a certain degree of significance for you?
Well, I guess so there's something that calls to me here. When I moved away, I've definitely felt like I had a purpose here. And I was because I had to move away. I felt, I'm doing courses and jobs and stuff, but I felt really like I hadn't fulfilled my purpose here, and I felt quite upset about leaving it. And then when I discovered through doing the course, the walking course, and then discovered that I could do tours there, I find like I kind of find my purpose, and I felt like that's what I was meant to be doing here. So it feels right.
And given that you've been here for a while now, what do you think it means to be from an upland area?
To be from an upland area?
To be living in certainly an upland area.
I don't know if I could. I mean, there's the beauty of it, and you feel like I'm living in the middle of nowhere. It's quite remote. So I mean, that's the downside. Everywhere you have to drive to go anywhere. So that's the downside of it, I think. But it is a beautiful, peaceful, lovely area to be living in. So away from the bustle of society.
And how would you describe the area of, let's say, Rathdangan to someone who's never been here before?
The middle of nowhere. It's a crossroads with a few houses. It's a little village in the Wicklow, on the edge of the Wicklow Mountains, basically. There's not much to it at the moment because the pub is closed, the shop is gone, all that's left is the town hall, the church and the school, so there's not much here.
And even maybe from interactions you've had with other people, would Rathdangan have had maybe better facilities or better services years ago?
Yeah. Well, from like the Rathdangan. Oh, I forgot about that. When you asked me before, one of the Rathdangan history events was to walk through the town and stopping at various points and hearing the history of the town. And I was actually amazed. Like he was pointing out like a shop there and a shop there, and there was a nail shop there, a shoe shop there. It seemed like it was quite a bustling community, and the schools, there was more schools around in various places. There was a jail there. There's it seemed like there was definitely more going on at one stage.
Why do you think that changed?
I think jobs, probably people seem to gravitate. I mean, if you've got to be able to live, the lifestyle's changed, jobs changed. I guess farmers would still be around here, but besides that, if you're not farming here, what are you going to do? There's not much, so you'd end up moving closer to cities. Here, that's a good distance. Say it's about an hour and 20, an hour and a half into Dublin, so it'd be a long commute. This say it's happening all around Ireland. Villages are just slowly dying.
And how would you describe the sense of community and local life in the area, or even in the broader kind of Wicklow Mountains?
Coming from an outsider's point of view, I mean, I found it a little bit difficult because I find that the people, although in general Irish people are very friendly and the people around here also are very friendly, I think people grow up with the friends they have and they stick with them, and if they don't feel they really need to have extra friends in their lives, so they'd be friendly and lovely, but that's as far as it goes. So I found it a bit harder to break into communities or make friends living out here. So,
and just to come back to the kind of questions of tourism just for a moment, so how do you think tourism, what's the kind of state of tourism in the Wicklow Mountains at the moment?
I think there's a lot of amazing places and a lot of amazing tours. I think they all seem to be focused on the east side of the mountains and the east coast rather than the west side of Wicklow. I think if you were a tourist coming into the country, you'd end up going to the east side and not even venturing anywhere near the west side, in general.
And why do you think that is?
Access, maybe, easier access, I don't know. But, I mean, there's Glendalough, there's the sea on that side, and I don't know what that divide is really, the mountains dividing the two. So, and I don't know, the tourism has just been more developed on that side than it has on this side.
And what do you think are some of the biggest challenges that tourism might bring to the Wicklow Mountains?
The challenges? I guess maybe because the road structure, there could be issues there. I mean, the upkeep of the roads, and then because the roads are quite narrow, can be quite tricky to bring tourism in, actually, because I mean, you can't really bring a bus up some of these roads. I can't think of nothing else coming to mind right now.
And what about the benefits of tourism to the Wicklow Mountains? So obviously you would see a degree of that through Tierna Glass.
Yeah.
What kind of benefits do you think it has?
Well, I mean, in any way, if you have tourism, it should better the community, because you're bringing people into the town, then there'd be access in pubs and restaurants and shops and service stations and all that, so it would be bringing in jobs and people into the community, bringing life back to towns or whatever, So I think tourism is always beneficial.
And what current sites or locations do you think that tourists visit most in the Wicklow Mountains, and why might that be?
Definitely Glendalough. I guess it's really popular. It's a beautiful ancient site. It's got the lakes. It's got the ruins, monastic site. There's what else is there? There's Glencree, but it's not too far from Dublin. See, I guess that's the thing. Dublin, you'd be coming in as a tourist to Dublin, and then the east side is just access is better. What else is there? Can't blank. On this side, there's Rusborough House. There's a few sites around Bray. there's lots of walking tours, hiking stuff.
What would the most popular of those be?
I don't know. Yeah, I can't think of.
And what role do you think that upland communities can play in developing tourism and making tourism maybe better in this part of the world?
What? So read the question.
What role could local communities play? I guess. Yeah, I mean, local allowing access, pubs and restaurants and shops welcoming tourists, I guess. Local, making sure access is, like, roads are in good condition, making sure the place is picturesque and clean and tidy, which is a great attraction, is the quaintness of Ireland to foreign tourists. Welcoming, friendly. Yeah, can't think of anything else right now. What's the best thing, do you think, about living in an upland area? I know you mentioned some of it earlier on, but what's the best thing about living in a mountainous area?
I guess the beauty. That would be the thing that jumps out at me.
I might have asked this already, but what's your favourite view?
Okay, from our property, if you walk down to the bottom there and you look out, you can see the mountains. It's an amazing view of Lugnaquilla and the mountains. If I walk up the road towards the church, you look down the valley there, and especially at sunset, it's just amazing, the view on that road.
And if you could change one thing about, let's say, Rathdangan or indeed the Wicklow Mountains, what would that be and why?
If I could change anything, I'd love to see the pub reopen, a little shop. I'd love to be able to walk to the pub and a shop, basically, so that I wouldn't have to get in my car and drive to go to any of these places. That's locally about the Wicklow Mountains in general. I think the roads, some of the roads are quite bad, very narrow. I'd love to see footpaths along the sides of the roads. It's putting your life in your hands, walking the roads. So.
And what challenges do you think that communities in the Wicklow Mountains will face in the kind of short and maybe the long-term future?
Communities will face challenges. Jobs, maybe. Yeah. I mean, things have changed, especially since COVID, but with the, now people can work from home. But yeah, so that's one thing that COVID has been good for, I guess. But challenges, I guess, if the road, Wicklow Council's doing an okay job with the roads. Isolation, maybe, for the smaller. I don't know, can't really think of anything.
And what about even with Tierna Glass? I mean, I know you mentioned access is a big challenge, but are there any other things that might be difficult kind of in the short or long-term future with that? Well,
I'm always going to be reliant on the goodwill of the landowner. So if he changes his mind, then decides he doesn't want me to do the walking tours there, then that's it for me. So I'd have to come up with a different thing to do as my job. So yeah, that could be a challenge. But generally it is difficult to get bookings. So advertise, you have to have money to advertise properly. So and then the access, the road access into the site, parking around the area, there's all difficulties. So.
And what does it mean to you to be, I suppose, living and working in this area?
I feel, I'd like like having a job that's close to home. I don't want to be driving an hour or so to go to work. I love having a job that's local and in the outdoors, doing something that I really enjoy, in the nature and the history and getting to meet new people. So I feel like it's a great fit for me, and I feel like it's what I'm meant to be doing. So I feel happy about that. Yeah. I've kind of lost track of what the question was.
Just what does it mean to you to be living and working in this area?
Yeah, I think it's quite important. But maybe it's just getting older. I just hate the idea of having to drive for ages or work in an office again. So yeah.
And is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you'd like to add to the record or discuss?
No, nothing's coming to mind.
That's great. Thank you very much, Nicky. And I'll just stop the recording now.